Hi guys, how are you all today morning? Good morning. Today is 12th December 2023. My name is TSV Raghavan and I live in Chennai, Tamil Nadu, India. This is my spiritual vlog on YouTube. HARDAN, 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 Haribol, TRSV, Nectar, NECTAR, Nectar. In this particular vlog, in all my previous videos, we have been trying to discuss about the knowledge and information that we have gleaned through the study of spiritual books, scriptures, contemplation on the material universe, and meditation on the spiritual universe. This particular video in this vlog is no exception to that rule. In fact, it is a mere continuation of all that we have been doing in all my previous videos. Kindly subscribe to my vlog and press the bell icon so that I may keep reminding you of all my previous, present, and future videos. So let us continue with the topic of discussion for today's video. In the past few videos, we have been talking about a very important term which is perennial to the existence of every human living entity, whether male or female, and his or her psyche in a particular lifetime in this material world. This particular term is known as mind. According to Srimad Bhagavad Gita, the Hindu epic Mahabharata segment, Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has openly stated, this living entity is like a chariot. This chariot is driven by 5 separate white horses running in different directions. These 5 horses are known as etheric senses. However, the reins of these senses are in the hands of a driver or pilot called intelligence of that living entity. This chariot is the place where the individual spirit soul is sitting in the passenger seat as a hapless passenger. However, this chariot is driven by an instrument called mind. It is this particular mind that we are discussing in several videos of mine in the immediate past. According to Lord Krishna, mind is the driving instrument of a chariot, just like an engine is the driving instrument of every machinery or vehicle. The vehicle may be a two-wheeler like a bike, a four-wheeler like a car, limousine, lorry or truck, or a complete train with an engine attached to it, and a plane with an engine attached to it, and so on. It is that particular engine which is the perennial component of that particular vehicle. Similarly, mind is the perennial component of this chariot called the human living entity. Without mind, the four layers of material body of a living entity get separated, and the gross body, that is the fourth layer, becomes redundant and useless, just like when the engine of a vehicle is removed, that particular vehicle becomes redundant and scrap. It is this very important instrument called mind that we are talking in some of my previous videos, and we are trying to analyze this particular ingredient in the life and psyche of every human living entity, whether male or female. Mind is the subtle part of the human living entity. Mind is a part of the subtle layers of the body of the human living entity, whether male or female. The not so subtle part of this mind is known as a mass of tissue called brain, which is safely embedded in the cranium of every human living entity, whether male or female. The three subtle layers of material body are known as the causal body of intelligence and logic, the astral body of mind, feelings and emotions, and the etheric body of five senses, namely sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. Vibrations emanating from these three subtle bodies, made up of an element of the material world called ether, are transmitted to this subtle instrument called mind. From mind, they are further transmitted as messages into that mass of tissue called brain. From the brain, after these messages are duly treated and processed by that brain, some juice is extracted, which is percolated down the gross body of that living entity, whether male or female. The life and actions of that particular living entity, whether male or female, depends upon the juice that is percolated down by that brain into the rest of the gross body of that particular living entity. However, now we will appreciate that it is the mind which is the link between the three subtle bodies and the brain of the gross body, which forms the fourth layer of material body of a living entity called whether male or female. Now, here we will discuss this thing further. In one particular context, it has been specifically mentioned that 75% of humanity in the society of a lifetime in a given time belongs to the ordinary, mundane, vegetating, trance-like situation situated human beings. People who are just here thinking that they have come only to enjoy a particular life. The of the remaining 25%, 20% are those who gravitate towards and worship the dark, negative forces of this material world, whereas only 5% worship the positive forces of this material world. While discussing about several case histories, we have discussed about achievers from the 5% of this material world, which includes those who are positive and material and those who are positive and spiritual. However, we must grudgingly accept that an individual mind is reserved for every individual living entity and hence of every individual spirit soul. So while discussing about the case histories regarding mind, we have to take into consideration the 20% who are worshipping the dark negative forces too. Today we shall discuss about one case history pertaining to a living entity who worshipped these dark negative forces which are colloquially called the underworld. So let us begin. There is a place called Staten Island in the state of New York in the United States of America. In this Staten Island, there was one particular house where a 70-year-old man and his wife lived alone, or these people as a couple lived separately from their family. Their offspring had settled elsewhere and probably got married off to different families. These two remained in this house. In the year 1960 or 62, one day that old lady of 60s approached the local police station. She said that her 70-year-old husband had simply vanished in thin air after he went out on a walk in the winter cold one night along with two mysterious looking guys. This old lady had never seen those mysterious guys before. When she objected to this 70-year-old man who had received these visitors and had agreed to walk along with them into the cold night, the 70-year-old man, told her, "Don't worry, I am wearing thermal underwear." Thermal underwear is a suit which is worn by people in very cold places to protect their own skin from the cold wind. This old man walked out into the night along with those two mysterious guys and simply evaporated into thin air, according to this old lady who was in her mid 60s. The people or the policemen were visibly intrigued. They asked her, "What did your husband do?" She said he was a 70-year-old man who was a scrap dealer by profession and business, and he was one of the nicest persons she had ever come across in her lifetime. He never made any waves or got into any controversy. The police was not satisfied with this explanation. The cops asked this old lady, "Dear lady, please tell me the name of your husband." She said, "His name is Anthony Strollo." Strollo is an Italian name, and it could have been a Sicilian Italian name. The cops got intrigued. It was an Italian name, and they knew by now that there is a criminal organization called Cosa Nostra or Mafia, which is very active in this eastern part of America. But this lady said that her husband, who was 70, was most low profile, decent, gentle, never raised his voice, and was living as a scrap dealer in Staten Island. The intrigued cops began making inquiries. After a lot of knocking around and consulting several informers, they one day came across one informer who said that this lady, who had been married to this gentleman called Anthony Strollo for half a century, did not know, probably, that her husband's underworld name was Tony Bender, and he was second or third in command in one of the top New York five families who were indulging earnestly in Sicilian Cosa Nostra activities. This guy was directly under the Don called Lucky Luciano, Vito Genovese, Tommy Eboli, and the three were people who were at the top of the family, which was initially known as the Luciano family and was now called the Genovese family. Anthony Strollo, alias Tony Bender, was such a genius that he had managed to hide his own real identity even from his own wife of half a century for so many years. And this lady thought that her husband was just a mere scrap dealer. Here we will take a detour. This man also is a living entity who worshipped the dark negative forces of this material world. That is precisely the reason why his mind made him act according to the requirements of the negative forces of this material world, which is known as underworld. According to one another mafiosi and very famous mobster called Vincent Teresa, it is not easy to become part of a criminal enterprise, especially Cosa Nostra or Mafia. You have to be genuinely soaked in the underworld, neck down, till you become slightly qualified to be recognized by your contemporaries in this underworld and mafia. Anthony Strollo, alias Tony Bender, had such a brilliant mind. His driving instrument called mind had made him camouflage his complete life to such an extent that not even his own nearest and dearest ones came to know about his true identity. It was a fact that Tony Bender was neck deep into mafia work, and he had probably indulged in a lot of crime, violence, and murder. Yet he was seldom arrested, booked, or put into prison all his life. That was this man's genius. The fact was that this Tony Bender joined the mafia of New York under a person called Joseph Bonanno and another called Salvatore Maranzano in his early teens. It was only after he went into the underworld that he got married to the 65-year-old woman who probably was not even aware of the fact that her husband was a working villain who worshipped the negative forces of New York. Not only this, Tony Bender participated in the Castellamares War in the early 30s of New York's 20th century. Later on, he joined Vito Genovese, another successful mobster, and became part and member of the Luciano family. Tony Bender prospered as a mafiosi and a mobster for another 30 years. But his wife, who was only bothered about this man's earnings, never tried to find out where his money came from. Lucky Luciano, the chief of the Luciano family, of which this Tony Bender was third or fourth in command, had mentioned in his own biography called Luciano Testament. Tony Bender was so secretive and unpredictable that not even his closest knew who he was supporting or where he stood in any argument or tiff with other mafiosis. This was the brilliance of the mind of this particular person called Tony Bender. Tony Bender usually went to visit Luciano in his suite in Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York. But even here, though he knew that Luciano's suite and house or office was in the second or third floor of that hotel, never went to that office directly. Tony Bender was so secretive and suspicious that he invariably took the elevator to the 10th floor, alighted from that elevator, and climbed down the stairs to the second or third floor office of Lucky Luciano. This he did only to make sure that he was not being followed either by the law or by any other mafiosi. This was the nature of Tony Bender, and this nature sprung from his own body's instrument called engine or mind. His mind was extremely sharp, and hence vibrations emanating and transmitted from that particular mind into the brain of Tony Bender were such that they gave him such a mysterious persona. This is all I wished to talk in this particular video. We shall continue with our discussion about these mobsters in my next video. Kindly let me know what you think of my talk on this particular matter. Please give me your own expert opinions, thoughts, ideas, and views so that I may blend everything together for the sake of this society. Before concluding, let me remind you that I am also a published author with Amazon Kindle and paperback. I write on spiritualism, fiction, and assorted subjects. Spiritualism happens to be my favorite subject. Till we meet in my next video, it is good morning from TSV Raghavan.